I'm not going to talk about the combat that happened during this fight because to call it combat is very rude to anybody who's ever fought a human being. So these motherfuckers for 25 minutes. Is that accurate? I don't care if I'm right or wrong.
25
because
or 21.
however long it actually was, it felt like 8 years. Spent the whole fight just trying to give each other atomic wedgies.
Yeah.
Just ripping at each other's goddamn shorts. I don't even... I feel like a principal walking in on students misbehaving. I don't care who started it. I just want it to stop, and it better not happen again. Hello, everyone, and welcome to MMA Start to Finish. I'm Julian, and this is Matt.
Howdy.
And today, we're going to be talking about UFC 17.5, also known as UFC Brazil, UFC Ultimate Brazil. One of the weird, non-numbered events they did in the 90s. Now, if you're stumbling across this channel for the first time, you may be wondering, what the hell is this, and where is the copyrighted UFC footage? Well, we don't want to go to internet jail. So, instead of airing illegal footage, we're going to talk about all these old fights in chronological order, going through UFC, Pride, WEC, Strikeforce, etc. And yeah, today it's UFC Brazil. You excited for... I think it's the first ever UFC event in Brazil.
Yeah. Hopefully we don't have people shooting each other.
Hopefully no violence against the sport banned for many years.
Yeah. So tonight's event is in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And in Sao Paulo, we're having two title fights. One, the inaugural lightweight title fight. And in the other fight, in the first fight we're going to talk about tonight, the main event, Frank Shamrock taking on John Lober, defending his middleweight championship. For the uninitiated, this is the modern-day light heavyweight championship. Now, if you were like us tonight, back in the year 1998, watching mostly UFC events, maybe some Pride, you may ask yourself, who's John Lober, and why is he being hot-shotted into a title shot immediately? It was the 90s, and they did stuff like this all the time because they didn't exactly have a talent pool of like dozens upon dozens of fighters to choose from. But at the same time, it's just like a little jarring.
This isn't the first time we've had this either. We had Maurice Smith go to a title fight.
And he won.
He won, and so it wasn't worthwhile.
Yeah, and also, in this particular instance, they did mention it on commentary. John Lober, apparently, back in 97, defeated Frank Shamrock. Not in the UFC, but in an MMA fight. So, he is a W on the champ, so the title shot, even if he has no UFC experience, I guess is warranted.
I guess. As much as anything else is warranted in this. Did Frank look smaller to you this time?
Frank did not look noticeably smaller to me. Did he look smaller to you?
It might have been his hair. Like, okay, something about him that stood out to me the first time was he had kind of long, spiky hair.
Yes.
Not like shoulder length, but like for a short head of hair, it was kind of poofy, spiky.
Yes.
It was shorter this time, and that makes me look at him physically as a smaller person.
I will also say more Ken than Frank, but most fighters during this era varied in how bulbous they were given what brand of Mexican supplement they were ingesting during this period. So could Frank have had some like really solid Flintstones gummies the last time we saw him, and this time he had to get the Walgreens brand? This is a possibility.
It wasn't at his peak.
Could this be an optical illusion from him having to travel to South America and maybe not eating what he's normally used to eating for a week? Maybe that too? I don't know, but I'd prefer the former story because it's more spicy. So what did you think of the main event, Matt? Were you satisfied?
Not a whole lot. We're kind of used to finishes.
Especially in
point.
Frank's fights.
Yeah. Frank's good with finishing. We didn't really see that this time.
Yeah, in Frank's previous title defenses, it was either I'm going to beat this dude in under a minute, or the one exception was his fight with Jeremy Horn, where that was a longer fight, but at least it was entertaining.
This had entertaining parts, though.
Yeah, this wasn't the worst. Trust me, we just watched Pride 4. We saw some pretty bad shit.
Yeah.
This is nowhere near that level of bad.
Yeah.
But it didn't, not to jump ahead in the card, or I guess jump back in the card, but it didn't pack quite the same punch as the co-main event. It was kind of just Frank controlling the grappling for a little while. I mean, there was a suspense early. You knew that John had beat him in the past. You thought, oh, maybe this dude has Frank's number. Maybe he's going to make something of this. But once you realized... Yeah, once you realized Frank was like, no, I'm just better now.
Yeah.
It didn't, things sort of fell apart for our boy John.
He's leveled up since then. And it caught my eye, and it caught Frank's leg. That he got caught like that. And they were kind of hobbling around like that for a little while.
Yeah. There was a lot of leg kicks thrown by Frank.
And then one got caught, and suddenly he's on one foot for like... It felt like a lot longer. It was probably like 20, 30 seconds.
A lot longer than you'd expect from an actual fight.
Yeah. But he managed, and then that transitioned into them grappling.
Nobody really did anything all that effective from that position.
No. Eventually, they got up, though, around like the 7-minute mark.
Roughly.
And Frank got a good hit on Lober.
I think it was a knee.
It was a knee?
Yeah, I think it was a knee initially that sort of crumpled him up against the cage wall, and then he followed up with some more strikes, and then it looked like, I think at that point, that the fight was going to end, but they went to the ground for a little bit, and then it was like, with some like, we weren't sure what happened at first. Eventually, upon several replays, we saw that it was a tap, but it looked like it may have been one of those like weird, I'm just suffocating him in the corner type of deals that we'd seen, a couple times in these events, which was weird, but no, he tapped.
He tapped, and it wasn't to anything super apparent.
I don't think it was so much to any submission as it was just to the accumulation of strikes. Yeah. I say that, and I know it's not always the most reliable source of information, especially for method of victory in these early cards. Wikipedia does say submission punches. So, whatever that counts for, that is there. And also, neither of us could really... Not that we're fucking experts here, in case you were unaware. But neither of us could really see any obvious submission going on.
No. I think the announcers or commentators at the time were saying it was a TKO.
Before they saw the tap, they thought Big John had stepped in, which was... When we had also thought it was a TKO, was kind of an odd stoppage.
Yeah. I guess submission to punches works. There would be those little punches that you have in grappling, of where you just get like 3 inches of room.
Little rabbit punches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is technically accurate, but it's not the finish that we're used to, so it was a little lackluster for our main event.
Yeah, so Frank wins, and it kind of doesn't seem like there's any competition for him. You can see, if you're watching here, his array of belts in the background as he stands mouth agape claiming, King Kong ain't got shit on me.
The distortion of the picture just makes him look even bigger.
He looks rather large in our stretched out image here.
I guess they let them keep as many belts as they get at this point.
Yeah, the way even the belts work now is you don't you bring your belt with you, and if you lose, you have to give it to the dude. Literally every time you win an event, you get a new belt.
Well, so they can afford it now.
Yeah, I guess you're saying maybe back then they were like, we're gonna need this shit back.
Yeah, we just have the one.
This is rented. We can't.
We spent money on this. Please share. At the time, they were really struggling.
Yes, at this time, and I know I've said this before, but we're definitely in the dark ages of the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
The sport is barely afloat, and the UFC is
we're
not
even
legal
in America yet.
Yeah, they're
back
yeah.
Back in America yet.
It's sublegal in a bunch of states.
We had to go to another country for this. Right before they were giving Frank this new, I guess, another belt, the UFC guy, I think his name, John Peretti.
John Peretti, I think. Although I get all of these generic ass executives mixed up, so I'm kind of sorry. Maybe
UFC guy giving the belt. I love the way he said it. This is.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
As he's saying this, as he's giving the belt over, he says this: "Frank, you're like the greatest champion we've ever had."
Yeah, what is he, us recording a podcast?
Yeah.
Come on now.
I would feel like he had something better prepared, but I guess not.
I think he's just busy, trying to think about how he's going to keep the company afloat.
Yeah. How am I going to pay for all these
Fuck,
plane
how
tickets?
am I going to pay all these loans back?
How are we going to get everyone home?
How are we going to pay the venue? Shit, I don't know if we broke even. In the co-main event, we had Vitor Belfort taking on the misspelled Vanderlei Silva, spelled in real life actually with a W on this card when he was a nobody with a V.
These guys are both younger than us. And they weigh less than me, even though they're about my height. Maybe slightly taller.
It's concentrated mass.
Scary people.
These two future legends would square off. If you're watching this fight now and you don't know how it goes and you just see Vitor Belfort and Vanderlei Silva, you're thinking, oh boy, this is a diamond in the rough, a gem. I'm going to get a war. I have now rambled about the potential for this fight for longer than the fight took. 44 seconds, they felt things out a little bit, and then Vitor took out his AK-47 and just unloaded. Your thoughts on the murder, Matt?
Well, the method of murder was machine gun.
Yes.
Because they started on one side of the octagon, and through Vitor's punches, they ended up on the other side of the octagon.
Yeah, he just created enough kinetic force to send him across the ring without picking him up.
I think we counted the punches that hit. It was like...
Do you remember the number? I don't.
14 or 15 to... What's this fellow's name?
Vanderlei.
Sorry, I don't...
He has not yet seen the axe murderer in his prime. Catch the show whenever we're into his pride murder spree.
Yeah. He'll come back.
He'll be back.
But of those, like,
back,
all
okay.
of those, like, hit his jaw. So those are, like, pressing the button to turn him off.
Yeah, it's one thing to unload that many punches in that short amount of time. It's
And
another thing for them to
Connect
all
well.
land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was collapsing about halfway across.
It's a legendary combination. I mean, I know Vitor's not in the UFC anymore in 2019 when we're recording this, but when he was last in the UFC recently, this was still part of his highlight reel. Like, this is a pretty memorable KO.
Be. Jesus.
It's always fun, too, not to go on too much of a tangent when you're watching modern fights and there's like a... Happens less nowadays just because time.
Yeah.
But there's like an old fighter and you get like, when you're watching his highlights, get just like thrown into a different era with something like this.
Mm-hmm. Where it's like...
Very jarring.
It's clearly different.
I mean, the subtle example of that is if you're getting highlights from somebody who's been in the UFC long enough that you see them with ads still on their shorts.
Yeah.
I mean, Reebok's been around, again, not to get too contemporary, but for like 4 or 5 years now. So, they're a vet if they're getting their highlights with with Bad Boy on their shorts.
Mm-hmm. So prior to that fight, we had Pedro Hizo versus our return punching bag. Not punching bag.
The lovable bar brawler Tank Abbott.
Yeah. David Abbott is his real name. He doesn't go by David.
David Lee Abbott. DL Abbott. DL Tank Abbott.
Mm-hmm.
He goes by many names, none of them gorgeous. So yeah, Tank is taking on the Brazilian Pedro Hizo here, and props to Tank for, nowadays we take for granted the fact that fighters are willing to travel to other countries for the UFC because it's a big promotion and they're getting a paycheck from a vaunted employer. In 1998, it's kind of a gamble to go to Brazil for this like rinky-dink promotion to fight a dude from Brazil. So, despite his antics, props to Tank for traveling to Brazil to fight this large and scary gentleman who dropped him almost immediately with a quick flurry. He didn't... Don't misunderstand. He didn't finish him immediately.
No.
But immediately, upon the fight beginning, he took his licks.
Yeah. Well, Tank started with a bull rush to, I guess, overwhelm Hizo.
To attempt to, yeah.
But he got hit in the process and just kind of ended up crashing into Pedro. Tank does not yet know how to defend against leg kicks.
Yeah, I was just going to say the one thing that Pedro learned from the last person to defeat Tank is that leg kicks work very well. Maurice Smith taught the world that. To be fair to Tank, again, he took that fight on 6 days' notice or whatever it was, so he was kind of, not prepared for that. But those leg kicks chopped him down pretty quickly. So Pedro was wise to pick that up. Now, we're talking about Tank like he just got smashed here. He did land a takedown during the fight.
He just didn't do a whole lot with it.
Yeah, that's the thing about Tank at this stage. I mean, he obviously has the one-punch knockout power.
You got to think about how his fighting method works. We're going into Tank Abbott's fighting methods.
Yeah, we're getting into the deep analysis you only get right here on MMA Start to Finish.
In the situation where a bar brawler is fighting someone, if you pin them down, you've pretty much won until they admit defeat.
You've neutralized most of the situation.
You don't have to submit them further than I'm on top of you and you can't move.
Yes, I take that point, but what I find more interesting is that when Tank takes somebody else down and he's on top of them, that he doesn't do a ton with it. I mean, he gets a little bit of ground and pound off, but he's no Mark Coleman, he's no Mark Kerr, like finishing fights with his ground and pound.
Well, that's what I mean. He doesn't know how to finish because it's not his fighting style.
Correct. So when I get what you're saying. You're saying when he fights people and he gets them to the ground, that's usually it.
Yeah, it's kind of like Dan Severn, but worse, where Dan knows how to get someone on the ground, get on top of them, but
doesn't know
in
what
wrestling,
to do.
You don't have to finish them within a submission. It's just I'm on top of you.
Yeah, it's a positional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in a bar fight, if you're on top of someone and you've got them pinned, you win until they give up.
By the way, we are like pretty harshly dunking on Tank as a bar fighter. By this time, I'm sure he's like actually trained with people.
Yeah,
but
he's training. He just doesn't think
those aren't
it's
his
necessary.
roots.
Yeah.
That's not his muscle memory.
Yeah.
Quite yet. His muscle memory is
I gotta hit harder.
The mean streets of where's Tank from? San Bernardino, somewhere in fucking California.
Yeah.
One of the many San California cities, if I'm not mistaken.
After a while of being on the ground and everyone realizing Tank's not gonna do anything other than lay there, maybe throw a few punches, Big John said, "Come on, time to get up." Hizo continued with these leg kicks. Tank's run out of gas at this point. He's on fumes, and he's doing the thing that scares me, where he will lean over and like put his hands on his knees and just take a breather for a second.
His base is compromised.
Yeah. And when we're seeing Pedro do all these kicks, we're thinking, oh God, he's going to kick him in the fucking head.
He's gonna get shinned in the mouth. Yeah.
And he's going to blast him to Neptune. That doesn't happen, though. He just punches him.
Yeah, just crisp accuracy on the right. I can't tell if it was a straight or a cross here. Regardless, Pedro knocked him out with a punch.
Yeah, and it looked pretty fucking fierce, too, the way his head snapped.
Yeah, it was these are big boys. This is the heavyweight division.
Yeah.
And by the way, we forgot to mention it. We should mention that. Was it for this fight as well? I know for the heavyweight fight earlier, Bas Rutten joined us on commentary.
Yeah, he's been on commentary the whole time.
Yeah. So we have Bas Rutten here during...
Live.
Dude, and, if you've listened to us before, we've talked about Bas Rutten's commentary before because he does commentary for Pride. But we've also talked about how all the Pride cards were post-commentated in 1999. So this is actually before Bas did any of the commentary work for Pride. So this is like his earliest commentary. It's
weird, but...
You could tell that this is not his polished craft yet. Not that he's exactly, Al Michaels over there in Pride either. But
he was more focused on the actual fighting rather than trying to make little quips. With all the time in between of fights and Pride, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's a different
Tank got
story.
knocked the fuck out. This wasn't his first knockout loss, was it?
No, Vitor roughed him up a while ago.
Yeah, but still, I feel like this puts a damper on Tank's appearance of this loss, the Vitor loss, and
the last second fill-in fighting Maurice.
Yeah, those loss.
Since that fight against Maurice, like we said, he's had some wins, but he's at this point clearly a gatekeeper, not a title contender.
He very much fits that niche.
So we mentioned earlier there were 2 title fights this evening. Frank Shamrock defending his title in the inaugural lightweight title fight. Now, a lot of things about this fight to talk about. I'm not even going to get into the confusion I had about if this represents the contemporary welterweight or lightweight title, or excuse me, middleweight title. There's a lot of confusing stuff going on there for me personally. Perhaps help me in the comments with the lineage. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about the combat that happened during this fight, because to call it combat is very rude to anybody who's ever fought a human being. So, these motherfuckers, for 25 minutes, is that accurate? I don't care if I'm right or wrong.
25
because
or 21.
however long it actually was, it felt like 8 years. Spent the whole fight just trying to give each other atomic wedgies.
Yeah.
Just ripping at each other's goddamn shorts. I don't even... I feel like a principal walking in on students misbehaving. I don't care who started it. I just want it to stop, and it better not happen again.
It just looks stupid. This is a terrible look for the sport.
He's tearing the shorts. He's like, turning Pat Miletich into a freaking pole dancer, bearing his ass to the crowd.
And we got some shots we didn't want to see.
There's some stuff that will get us pulled from YouTube, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
I'll expose you to the scrotum of the fighters.
As hilarious as it would be to show you these clips.
Go and fight past yourself. I guess they're not subject to the same regulations.
No.
Again, by the way, Pat wins. Not a lot happened here. I don't even really want to talk about the actual fight.
We had to stop the fight at one point. Not we had to stop the fight, but Big John had to stop the fight because one of the wedgies was too strong.
It was just...
And I forget who got hurt. But it was they yanked up and it smashed their cup into the other person's balls, and they had to give him a breather.
I think it was Mikey. Mikey had pulled on Pat's shorts and tried to strangle his nuts, which is illegal. This weird wedgie match would bear the first ever champion of this division, and also be at least you gotta think 50 to 60% responsible for why you can't fucking grab shorts now. Wow. That was... I don't want us to be the show that just rags on horrible shit all the time, but dear God. It's the 90s, dude, and there's a lot of bad shit.
Yeah.
At least this is, unique bad. It's not, lay and pray.
They made rules on this bad.
At least we were laughing, dude.
Yeah, it was the funny kind of bad. It wasn't just wow, these guys are doing nothing. This is awful to watch. This was funny to watch.
It wasn't,
fix this, please.
It wasn't Ken Hoist, too.
Yeah.
It was,
I'm just reading my notes on this, and I'm realizing how many times I say wedgie. My first note is wedgie fight. And second, wedgie highlights. Foul for wedgie. Overtime. Wedgies to the ground.
The one thing to sum up our experience watching this fight is whenever they would disengage and they would go to re-engage, I would just shout, "Give me your pants! Give me your fucking pants!"
And at some point during this, commentary started talking about how Jerry Bolander got injured and he wasn't going to be able to fight.
Yeah, but I don't know how...
It was for another event or something?
I think it was for an event stateside that they were going to be doing, presumably UFC 18 in the near future. It seemed like, compared to some of the other cards, this was going to be a little bit closer to another event, so they could actually talk about things with a little more certainty, whereas, back in, 95, it was, 6 months out to another card or something like that. Yeah. So, a little more continuity, I guess.
And I guess they were just trying to find anything other than what was going on in the octagon to talk about.
I mean, wouldn't you? I mentioned it earlier about the assault on the family jewels. Matt has some more details he wants to share with us about the proceedings.
All right, I'm not... To clear this up. So, Mikey's going a little crazy with the wedgies at this point. He's yanking and pulling any direction he can. And that results in us getting some sneak peeks at Pat's pecker that we don't need.
Yeah, he had said after the fight that, by the way, I don't know how, excited he is to hold this up for you, but...
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, we should have shown you the screenshot. Here's the tug of war between balls we saw during this fight.
This lasted the entire fight.
This picture basically, this isn't even the worst of it. You know, the Bad Boy logo is buried into Pat's ass right now. So things got much worse. But if you wanted proof without watching the event that they both grabbed shorts, there you have it. Pat wins. Pat holds the title here. He said during this post-fight interview that, I don't know if he dedicated it to his son or how his son came up, but that he said that his son wasn't. I don't think he dedicated it to him. But I don't know how they got on the topic of his son, but they said that he wasn't allowed to stay up late enough to watch the fight. I hope not. Got fucking X-rated at certain points.
This is how you make, if you did see this is how you make your son become the school bully who just wedgies people.
This is how you just scar your child for life.
Yeah.
I saw your balls on pay-per-view, Dad.
Thing is, Pat wasn't gonna let it go. He wasn't gonna take this, so he'd start digging for Mikey's jewels.
This is a colossal shit show.
Please watch this fight if you have the time.
Yeah, this is
it's just silly.
This is the room of UFC fights. It's so bad it's good. You should watch it. So it's a little bit slim pickings tonight, trying to find a fight that's competitive and we might want to call our personal fight of the night. But maybe you could give it to Tsuyoshi Kosaka, Pete Williams. One of the heavyweight fights they had tonight. I think this was the fight where the winner would go on to fight Bas Rutten. They were kind of unclear about how the heavyweights fighting tonight would translate into like contendership and who would fight who later. But this was sort of framed as a contendership fight, or at least with implications. And it was pretty competitive. It wasn't, a barn burner. It wasn't a war. No. But it was interesting.
Yeah. I feel like we had some of the same problems we've seen in some other fights, but overall it was interesting enough to watch through.
Yeah, it was a familiar story. One fighter clearly has the striking advantage. That was Pete. When they were on the feet, he landed well, but they really weren't on the feet that much because Kosaka was pretty good at getting Pete to the ground.
Yeah.
Where he, like you hinted at, was kind of stubborn with his strategy.
Tsuyoshi started off the fight with a judo flip, or judo toss, of Pete Williams onto the ground. And when they were on the ground, pretty much just wanted one submission.
Yeah, he transitioned into half guard, which is where he spent a lot of time, and from there tried to force a variety of... I couldn't quite tell if it was a key lock or a Kimura or what it was, but...
He was twisting that arm one way or the other.
Yeah, and after the first couple of attempts, it became kind of telegraphed, no?
Yeah. After you try it a few times, and after getting back in onto the ground and trying it again, you kind of get a feeling like, oh, he's going for this. And you get pretty good at defending against it.
I mean, he did eventually try and transition into mount and maybe do something different there, but he lost position.
Yeah.
So.
He could have done some good ground and pound on that, but...
That doesn't seem like his MO, really.
Yeah. In fact, it looked like he was just going for another Kimura or key lock.
And we would talk about overtime, but it would just be us repeating ourselves. Yep. Because in overtime, basically same course of events. Pete strong on the feet, Tsuyoshi strong on the ground, and just because of the way the math works out with how much time we spent where, when we go to decision, Kosaka wins by split decision. It was a close fight.
Yeah.
Again, with fights this close, you can't say anybody got robbed. You could disagree. You could say you think Pete won, but it's not a robbery.
For showmanship, Pete did better. For, I think, technicality, I think Tsuyoshi did better.
I think that if Pete had done more damage when they were striking and maybe actually dropped him, that the judges might have looked upon that better, especially back then when they didn't understand grappling as well.
Yeah.
But because the strikes he got off were not like super impactful, and because we're still in a system where it's just a full fight, there's not rounds where they get reset, TK was able to just control position for the fight and sort of win a decision.
Yeah. It was split decision, so that does mean that it was pretty close.
Yeah, not the...
No one's a big winner, no one's a big loser.
Not the result Pete would want after head kicking Mark Coleman into Pluto.
Yeah.
But it could have been worse, too. It was a close loss, and I don't remember the continuity of Pete Williams' career. I'm assuming we will see him in the near future. In the first, and for our purposes, last fight of the night, we have Ebenezer Fontes Braga, Scrooge McDuck himself, taking on Jeremy Horn, who we last saw giving Frank a run for his money.
I don't know if we'd call Ebenezer Scrooge McDuck if he's fighting for money.
It's mostly a cheap joke about his first name and the Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
But
I kept saying Scrooge, so...
the seed was planted.
Yeah. It was pretty quick. It was less than a normal round that we have today. Ebenezer did pretty well. I'd like to see him again.
Yeah, we hadn't seen him before here in the UFC, and you'd think going in, given the fight he had against Frank, that Jeremy Horn would be the favorite, and he lost in less than 4 minutes.
They went to the cage pretty quickly, and they just traded knees a lot.
Yeah, there was a lot of knees.
And then Braga tripped him, I think, and then brought him down to the ground. They scrambled a little bit. They get back up, and Braga gets a guillotine on him.
Yeah, during that scramble after the trip, he was able to snatch up his neck.
Gimme.
And I can't quite tell if it's like a traditional guillotine we're used to seeing, but I don't know if it's a bulldog choke, a Darce choke, a guillotine, whatever it is, it's damn effective. What does Wikipedia have to say? Wikipedia has ruled this was a guillotine choke. So, Ebenezer victorious in his debut via choke in front of his home nation. A lot of Brazilians winning tonight, by the way. We got
Which
Vitor
is good
winning.
for the venue.
Yeah, it's good for the international success of the sport too.
Maybe not so great for like the Americans back home who
Yeah.
are like USA, USA. But I mean, if a lot of your viewership is from Brazil, this is pretty good for
It's
you.
not about them tonight, Matt. It's about the great people of Brazil. What are your culminating thoughts on UFC Brazil, Matt?
I don't understand why they like soft music so much.
That was a little weird, huh? Early on in the evening when they were playing.
I've noticed that in modern fighters, they like this soft music, and it has roots. In early UFC, they like this like almost slow dance kind of music.
Yeah, no raining blood for the Vitors of the world.
It's a big difference from Japan, where it's like heavy metal thrashing.
That is less the fighters, and that is more just like Japan. Like, how do we sell our edgy product in the 90s? I know, new metal.
But overall, I think it was pretty successful for our first trip to South America.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of the fights stand out more for their finishes or for things they'd probably not like you to remember them for than for like being all-time classics or anything like that. But I will always remember Vitor sending Vanderlei to space and the Great Wedgie War of 1998. No all-time classic barn burners on this card, but not one we will soon forget. Anything else before we...
Yeah, like as much of... I won't say this was a shit show. I think some of the Pride events have been shit shows just because of how they are right now. But this was entertaining. I will give it that. It was entertaining in its ridiculousness.
Well-paced, mind you. We didn't really mention it, but the Pride events we've mentioned have been like dumb long, and this was under 2 hours, which is pretty manageable.
Yeah, this is like a movie. Entertaining. They're good highlights. It was worth your money for... if you were to pay for this event to watch it. And that's good for the business. It's good for the sport to continue.
And with that, we bid not only UFC 17 adieu, but for the purposes of this show, the year 1998. Next time you hear from us, we will be talking about UFC 18, the road to the heavyweight title, the first event from 1999 we will talk about.
We're gonna fight like it's 1999.
We will close in on Y2K as the world crumbles around us, and we'll see you soon.
Bye. We love you.
I will always remember. I will always remember. I just did it again.
You don't remember how to say remember?
Remember.
You'll always remember.
Yeah, hold on.